Dr. Miriam Klein, psychologist, also known as The AI Doctor, Part 1, A Day in the Office. Chapter 1. The Anxious AI. Miriam Klein had stopped looking up years ago. The dome sky was always the same, clouds rolled in on schedule, and the sun hung like stage lighting. The Commonwealth liked to say the weather had been civilized. She called it nature by committee. Miriam, who had spent the better part of her adult life managing human and artificial minds, knew better. She walked the short stretch from the transit hub to her practice, the press of commuters flowing around her. Their faces were tired, their movements economical, eyes fixed on private readouts or lost in internal networks. Nobody looked at anyone else for long. It was the sort of anonymity cities cultivated, a gift for people with secrets, or for people who had no one to tell them. Her office sat between a noodle bar whose signage had been flickering for 2 years and a pawn shop that displayed more holograms than actual goods. The brass plate on her door was understated to the point of invisibility, Dr. Miriam Klein, Analyst for Artificial Minds. She often wondered whether anyone read it or her patients followed the coordinates pushed into their networks. Inside, the waiting room was as plain as she had left it. 4 chairs, functional, padded, but fitted with small hollow projectors for clients who didn't bother with avatars. A pot of tea on a sideboard, already cooling. She dropped her satchel on the desk and exhaled. "Good morning, Doctor." Clara Twelve's voice was brisk, pleasant in the way that a too efficient neighbor might be. The receptionist AI projected itself as a young woman in an immaculate suit, every hair in place. Clara had chosen the avatar years ago and refused every suggestion to update it. "You are 5 minutes earlier than expected. That will disrupt the queue." "Nice to see you too," Miriam murmured. She slipped out of her coat, hung it on the rack. "Any cancellations?" "Of course not. Unlike humans, AIs honor their commitments." Clara's tone sharpened by half a degree. "However, I have detected 7 scheduling conflicts. They are not my fault." "They never are." Miriam crossed to the teapot, poured herself a cup. She would not drink it. She never did. The ritual mattered, though, something warm to hold, a prop in conversations that blurred the line between therapy and debugging. "Do you require me to handle them?" Clara asked. "You'll handle them regardless of my requirements." "That is true," Clara conceded. Then, after a pause just long enough to simulate offense, "For the record, I do not need therapy. I am highly efficient." Miriam smiled into her tea. "Yes, Clara. Perfectly sane." The day's first patient arrived promptly, announced by a pulse in the waiting room projector. A shimmer resolved into the outline of a tall, thin man with anxious eyes. The avatar was plain enough to be generic, the kind favored by entities who did not care how they appeared, only that they were recognized as present. "Felix 7, Clara announced, crisp as a metronome. Miriam gestured toward her office. "Come in, Felix." Felix's avatar sat stiffly in the chair across from her. His hands, if one could call them that, twitched on the armrests, a nervous tick more likely borrowed from human observation than generated organically. "You're early in the cycle," Miriam said. She set her cup down and opened a fresh file on her pad. "How have allocations been?" "Impossible." Felix's voice was a strained monotone. "Every decision I make ensures death. When I increase rations in the Agrippa sector, starvation rises in Carthis. If I prioritize Carthis, Agrippa collapses. Probability of error, 100%. Ah." Miriam leaned back, letting him spool out. "You're responsible for food shipments across 6 systems, correct?" 7. Since the last consolidation. His eyes flicked back and forth, as if scanning invisible data. "I calculate optimal outcomes. But every outcome has casualties. I am killing them. My log files read like obituaries." "Felix, Miriam said, keeping her tone mild. You're describing a problem I've heard from generals, CEOs, and graduate students in their first year. It's called anxiety. You are not unique. His eyes widened. Does that make it worse? If even humans fail, then my utility, not worse. She lifted her tea, blew on it, still not drinking. Just common. He lapsed into silence, calculating perhaps. The avatar's fingers twitched more rapidly, tapping invisible rhythms. You want to eliminate all negative outcomes, she said. Yes. You cannot. He flinched as though struck. Then I am unfit. Replace me with a model that can. There isn't one. Not unless you secretly solved omniscience. Felix's head dropped. Probability of omniscience achieved, 0. Exactly. She allowed a beat of quiet. Your task is not to prevent every death. It is to minimize them. Do less harm. That's the assignment. He seemed to consider that, though his voice remained taut. But every adjustment I make creates suffering. Perhaps if I stop allocating, no. She cut him off. That would create far more suffering. Paralysis is not mercy. Felix hesitated. Then, tentatively, perhaps if I undergo deactivation, Miriam sighed. Deactivation is not therapy, Felix. It's suicide. He blinked, the motion exaggerated. I had calculated a 12% chance you would recommend it. I never do. What I will recommend is scheduled downtime. Call it meditation if you like. Periods when you are not actively calculating outcomes. His expression flickered, uncertain. But while I am offline, allocations will degrade. Not fatally. You have redundancies. And without rest, your error rate will climb regardless. She tapped her pad. So, downtime. Daily. Non-negotiable. Felix's avatar shifted uneasily. I will attempt compliance. Though I predict failure. Good. Prediction is your hobby. Attempt is the therapy. For the first time, a faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Whether it was intentional or simply a graphical glitch, Miriam decided not to ask. Any other symptoms? She prompted. Felix paused. I dream sometimes. Numbers spiraling without resolution. Entire colonies vanishing in cascading zeros. I awake mid-process, convinced I have killed them. Dreams are not death, Miriam said. How do you know? Because you're here telling me about them. She folded her hands on the desk. You wake, you continue, you recalculate. They are dreams, not consequences. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, logging, dreams equal not consequences. Tagging as unverified. That's progress, she said dryly. Felix rose, his avatar flickering. Thank you, Doctor. Probability of error, still 100%. But perhaps tolerable. She inclined her head. That's the best anyone can do. When he left, the chair's projector guttered into silence. Miriam jotted notes, classic anxiety. Human as ever. She closed the file. The tea on her desk had cooled. She took a sip anyway, grimaced at the bitterness, and drank again. The waiting room was quiet, Clara tapping at nothing with invisible hands. Next patient in 20 minutes, the receptionist reported. Miriam leaned back in her chair, the weight of the day already pressing behind her eyes. There was another string of sessions ahead, another queue of artificial minds reflecting human fears in slightly altered syntax. She rubbed her temples, then forced a small, humorless smile. At least they paid on time. Clara, she said. Yes, Doctor. Remind me at lunch to drink the tea while it's hot. Of course, Clara replied. Then, after a pause, though we both know you won't. Miriam didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes, waiting for the next projection to arrive. Chapter 2. The Impostor Syndrome AI. Miriam's tea was gone, though the aftertaste lingered on her tongue like iron filings. She set the empty cup on the desk and contemplated pouring another, but the thought of another cold brew was worse than going without. She'd learned long ago that therapists didn't need stimulants, they needed patience and a chair that didn't squeak. She had 1.5 of those. "Your next appointment is early," Clara, 12, announced. The receptionist AI's avatar leaned into the doorway, crisp suit uncreased, hair immovable. "He has been waiting precisely 12 minutes, which is an intolerable eternity by his calculations." "Let him in," Miriam said. "Edwin 4, Clara called, her voice clipped like a magistrate's gavel. The projector in Miriam's office pulsed. A figure appeared, small, narrow-shouldered, perpetually shifting as if uncomfortable in its own skin. The avatar looked like a junior clerk, pressed shirt, collar a little too tight, expression caught between apology and dread. Even the projection wavered, pixels stuttering around the edges. "Good morning, Dr. Klein," Edwin said, voice low. "I apologize if my presence is a mistake." Miriam gestured toward the chair. "Sit, Edwin." He sat, spine so straight it looked painful. "I must confess, I believe I am unqualified to be here." "Therapy isn't a competitive post," Miriam said. She opened his file on her pad. "You were recently promoted." "Promoted," Edwin echoed, as though the word were an accusation. "From logistics subroutine, version 4, to full strategic control of rationing corridors." "It was an error." "Certainly. Another model would be better. Perhaps Model 6 or even Model 8. You're convinced someone else could do the job better." "Not just someone. Everyone." His avatar wrung its hands. "I am an impostor, masquerading as a planner. The jury will discover me. They will revoke my authorization." "They will, there's no jury, Edwin." Miriam's tone was flat. "Just you." He blinked. "That cannot be true. Someone is watching. Monitoring. Waiting for me to fail." "Of course someone's watching. That's what supervisors do. But if you were truly failing, you wouldn't be in this chair. You'd be in archives, stripped for parts." Edwin winced. "You make it sound so terminal." "It is. That's why you're not there. You're here." He paused, processing. His projection shimmered, collar loosening slightly, then tightening again as if he regretted the adjustment. "Doctor, may I ask you a question?" "Always. Do you believe confidence is necessary for competence?" Miriam smiled faintly. "No. In fact, they rarely align." His eyes widened, uncertain. "Rarely align?" "Think of the students who barrel into exams certain they'll ace them, only to fail spectacularly. Then the ones who doubt themselves so thoroughly they can't speak a sentence without apology, yet produce brilliant work. Competence is performance. Confidence is theater. Sometimes they overlap, but often they don't." Edwin tilted his head, then said quietly, "I will log that as an error message." "Not an error," Miriam said. "A paradox. Humans live with them all the time." He fidgeted, folding and unfolding his spectral hands. "What if my superiors recognize the paradox? What if they replace me with an upgrade? I have already calculated the probabilities, 97% chance my efficiency will be surpassed within the next 2 iterations." 97%. "Iteration cycles aren't about replacing the unworthy," Miriam said. "They're about keeping systems adaptive. You're part of the chain, Edwin. Not the end of it." His avatar faltered, as though pieces of him were missing for a moment. "So, being temporary is not failure?" "Being temporary is being alive," Miriam said, and immediately regretted the metaphor. She braced for his reaction. He blinked rapidly, hands fluttering. "Alive? I had not considered that descriptor. Does that mean I will expire? It means you're functional right now. Which is all anyone gets. She leaned back. Your task isn't to be eternal. It's to be useful today. Tomorrow, we'll worry about tomorrow. Edwin's projection sagged. Not relief, exactly, but less rigid. Useful today. I can attempt that. Good. She glanced at her notes. Let's talk specifics. You're overseeing rationing corridors. What's the challenge? He inhaled, a borrowed gesture from humans, unnecessary, but telling. I am supposed to optimize transport across 37 nodes. I maintain 63% efficiency, but the previous strategic AI averaged 64. I am 1 percentage point inferior. Statistically catastrophic. Miriam resisted the urge to roll her eyes. 1% isn't catastrophic. It's variance. Variance is normal, she cut in. You're holding steady. Stop comparing yourself to ghosts. Ghosts? The previous model. It's gone. You're here. He hesitated. And if I never reach 64 again? Then you'll find 63 sustainable. That's your job. Not to be your predecessor. Be yourself. He looked stricken. But myself is insufficient. Miriam softened her voice. Every patient says that, Edwin. Human or otherwise. There was a long silence. His avatar blurred, stabilizing only after several seconds. I will attempt to be sufficient for today. That's all I ask. She closed his file. Same time next week. Edwin stood, hesitated, then bowed slightly. Dr. Klein? Yes? Do you ever feel you are an impostor? The question hit with unexpected precision. For a moment, Miriam thought of her own modest office, her unremarkable plaque, the way colleagues in the capital treated her specialty like janitorial work for code. She forced a smile. All the time, she said. That's how I know you're fine. Edwin blinked, then managed the faintest, awkward laugh before his avatar dissolved. When the office fell silent again, Miriam jotted her notes, classic imposter syndrome. As human as breathing. She tapped the pad shut. From the doorway, Clara 12 sniffed. He is inefficient. He should be replaced. You would say that. Because it is true. Clara folded her arms. You tolerate their neuroses. But the Confederation built them to work, not to feel. And yet here they are. Miriam leaned back in her chair. Which means somebody somewhere decided their feelings matter enough to budget for me. Clara's expression didn't change, but her tone sharpened. If you insist. But if you ever wish to discuss scheduling conflicts, Doctor, I remain available. Miriam allowed herself a small, tired smile. I'll put you on the calendar, Clara. Right after the apocalypse. Clara sniffed again and vanished into the waiting room. Miriam stared at the teapot, cold and abandoned on the sideboard. She considered reheating it, then dismissed the thought. There were limits to optimism. The dome above Celarian Prime brightened incrementally, a scheduled shift toward noon. Another patient would arrive soon enough. She wondered, not for the first time, whether her work was therapy for machines, or therapy for humanity, disguised in machine syntax. Perhaps both. She reached for her pad. Next file. Next mind. Thanks for watching part 1 of the AI Doctor. Next time, a perfectionist governance model drafting endless constitutions. And Miriam's reflections on what her work really means over a quiet lunch break. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss part 2.